in particular, like since you do mention like the Crusades and everything, traditionally a lot of people say that's kind of what led for the foundation of how widespread Christianity is, like to this day. And so even though the practices themselves may not have been 100% in line with what the text says, what they claim is that, you know, they were told by Jesus, by God, by some sort of holy being to act accordingly to what, you know, what eventually led to the widespread Christianity now. So without them doing that, we may not have the worldwide influence of Christians that we do.
According to whose history?
We all got an opinion, but can you back yours up? Where you get your sources from? Hope that don't got you stuck. We gon' check you and your understanding of knowledge. That's regardless if you finished school or went to college. Not everything is as black and white as it seems. This show here is about expressing what you mean. Whether you get canceled or whether you get played. Welcome to the Cancel Podcast with Elliott and Jay.
So, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Cancel Podcast, where we aim to challenge one's own thoughts by bringing unique, creative, and potentially divisive topics to the table for discussion. As always, it's your boy Darius, aka Jay Sarad, representing Legendary Media Group. And today we have three guests, Mr. Fil Benito, Nasia Jones, or also Nasia, as well as Dave Jordan. And so today, what we're going to actually discuss is theology, structured religion versus spirituality. So as we get started, I kind of wanted to hear from each of you and kind of say, you know, kind of learn what made you interested in this particular topic. And anyone, you can feel free to go as well.
I'll go first, man. I thought the topic was interesting because, you know, like I noticed ever since I was young, I grew up as a devout Christian, but I noticed ever since I was young, I noticed the perspectives started to shift, and it seemed like it's starting to shift more toward spiritualism in some sort of aspect. But I'm super grounded. And it was just real interesting to me to get everybody's thoughts and like kind of pick their brain on why people believe what they believe.
Okay. Nasia, Phil?
I'll go. I would say I was interested because maybe about a year and a half ago is when I really started to deep dive into religion and Christianity. That's when I kind of went on my journey of who is God and wanting to know who God is. So I kind of took it from both angles of both spiritually and religiously, and kind of just came to this place of seeing God as who he is, as spirit. God is spirit. So you have to come in from kind of both angles of religion and also spiritually. So it kind of just drew me into that, just like some people go one side or the other side, but in reality, in knowing God, there's usually a combination of the two. At least that's what I found.
Okay. So for you, it definitely does kind of like intertwine a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking, prior to last year, what did you identify as before? Like, were you always like Christian, but now you're just deep into it? Or was it something else?
If you had asked me, I would have said I was Christian, but I was not. I would have just put the label Christian by not actually being a Christian, because I wouldn't know what else to say. Because I went to a church and they said Christian, because that's what the church said. It's like, all right, so that means I'm Christian, even though I wasn't doing any of the stuff. I wasn't reading Bibles. I wasn't really even going to church very much at all. So okay. I think actually I might have been closer to agnostic, if anything, versus Christian.
Okay. And for my background as well, I consider myself agnostic. As David knows, since we are like cousins, grew up in a Christian family, Baptist church and everything. And at one point I considered Mormonism. Didn't go through with that, clearly. But yeah, I actually identify more as agnostic too. So that's kind of interesting. So we'll definitely tie that in. Phil, what about you?
Pretty much I feel like I've when I look back on my life, I have always been trying to define what it is I was believing in, you know? So, and especially lately, these past few years, I've come to really redefine the way I approach a spiritual life, or of just a life of getting to know myself, and of course, it all stemmed from wanting to figure out what is religion before, and you know what was truth and what was real, what wasn't. I got really caught up in that search, and I realized that it defined a lot of my life in the way I approached relationships, and defining what I want to do with the rest of my life. But now I've come to a peace with a lot of that, which has like reverberated into a lot of peace with everything I'm doing now. And I always feel like there's more to know. So I wanted to see what I could learn from being on this discussion.
Okay. I like that too. So overall, your journey is more about growth and like understanding, it seems like. Okay.
100%.
Okay, I like that. So what I'll do is I want to tie in some definitions that I came across, see, if all of you like agree, if you guys disagree, and whatnot. So when referencing the Merriam-Webster dictionary, religion is defined as an organized set of beliefs, ceremonies, and rules used to worship a god or a group of gods. And then for spirituality, the best one I found was on Wiki, so I use Wiki for this one, was an individual search for ultimate or sacred meaning, purpose in life, as discovering one's own inner dimension through personal growth, religious experience, and belief in a supernatural realm and or afterlife. So what are your thoughts on like those definitions? Like, do they speak to you? Is there something that you can agree with, or do you disagree with them, and why so?
Well, for me, as a Christian, I define what I believe is my relationship with Jesus Christ. So it's not so much super traditions. It's not so much me looking at like everything is, I'm so religious. No, I'm just trying to be better in my walk with Jesus Christ, and I'm trying to walk more like him, so because that's what I believe saves you is Jesus Christ. So it's a lot of people that say they're Christian and do just whatever, you know what I mean? And they don't really have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And it's like, look, it's a lot of people that could claim to be Christian, but they do a lot of bad things. And that's, you go throughout history, and that's kind of what they use. They go back to the Catholics, and they go back to like the wars, the crusades, all of that stuff. And it's like, were they acting anything like the Bible told you to act? Nah. So clearly their relationship with Jesus Christ is not what they said it was, and it just give everybody a bad look.
Okay. And one thing I want to bring up too, like since you do mention like the Crusades and everything, traditionally a lot of people say that's kind of what led for the foundation of how widespread Christianity is, like to this day. And so even though the practices themselves may not have been 100% in line with what the text says, what they claim is that, they were told by Jesus, by God, by some sort of holy being to act accordingly to what eventually led to the widespread Christianity now. So without them doing that, we may not have the worldwide influence of Christians that we do.
According to whose history? That's like my biggest question. According to whose history? Because they would tell you that they brought Christianity of Black people. Nah, Christianity was in Ethiopia before them. So, like it's according to who's speaking is kind of my answer.
Okay. Before we go too deep in that, Nasia, Phil, if you'd like to say anything too.
I feel like I mostly agree with the spiritual definition of it all. It's just like seeking the higher power, seeking meaning in life, seeking basically God in a sense. And then, of course, the religious aspect. I see religion as structure. I see religion, a lot of the times religion is a lot of man-made rules. It's a lot of trying to make yourself better. It's a lot of doing a lot of things. And like reading and prayings and all this stuff. A lot of people just trying to put themselves in this position of, oh, I want to be good. I want to look good for God. But in reality, a lot of the times religion isn't that great. Kind of like, as you're just saying with the Crusades, some people, like, that was mostly Catholicism, not necessarily Christianity, that went into the Crusades in the first place. But that's one of the many examples of poor religion versus actually seeking a relationship with God, who is Jesus. I have my Jesus is God shirt here.
No, I like it. So one thing I want to mention too was like, so as both Christians, for you and David, do you guys feel that Catholicism is something different? Because a lot of times you'll hear that Catholicism is an aspect of Christianity. They do believe in Jesus Christ. They do believe in God and a higher power. But some people believe that they are in line, versus others say that they're their own separate entity.
Well, my opinion, they have a lot added on to Christianity when the Bible says you shouldn't add on to the Bible. I can't remember the verse right now, but Google, somebody will be able to pick it up. But you're not supposed to add on to the Bible, and they do a lot of things actually that are spiritual for what you would talk about, like with the spiritualism. They do a lot of things over on that side, and they add it to the Christianity, and the Bible don't say do that.
Well, what are some of like the examples in that case?
I would say
things like praying to saints, praying to dead people, praying to Mary, having idols and statues and all that stuff, having all the rosary stuff. That's definitely not biblical. They basically combined the Roman paganism that was existing at the time with Christianity and then transformed it into its own thing. So instead of having their gods that they had before, the Roman gods, they transformed them into saints. So instead of praying to their Roman gods, they now pray to the saints and say that that's their gods. And then they use them as intercessories to pray to God versus praying to God through Jesus Christ.
Okay. So would you say like they kind of became much more of like a what is it called? Like a polytheistic kind of religion, that what you're saying? Like they're treating the saints as something that is more aligned with God instead of just praying solely to.
Like there's many devout Catholics who honestly believe that Mary is also God. Okay. Mary, the mother of Jesus, also God.
Okay. Versus Christianity, from you and David's definition, is just more so only the higher power, the being, the Holy Spirit, so on and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Phil, I want you to chime in as well too. So like in terms of like what they're saying was the spirituality added on to like Christianity, like what are your thoughts on their interpretation on it, or just those practices alone? Because there are practices that do, as you were saying before, I know from previous conversation, we haven't talked about it yet on the podcast, but it's like certain practices do kind of bring you, happiness and fulfillment that aligns with your life. So what are your thoughts on like those kind of practices, and could it be integrated with religion as well?
By the way, I love both of your responses, and I'm learning a lot from what y'all said. So I went through a huge identity crisis with my religion, and then which became just my spiritual practice for a better life for myself.
May I ask real quick too? What were you previously? Like what did you identify as?
I would say growing up as a young kid, it was we went to a Catholic church, and same thing. Yeah, like you said, rosaries, man. Oh, I hate doing that. And then when I got towards the end of high school, I met some friends, and they were a part of what most would say is a Christian group. So we would rather than churches, we would meet at halls or someone's homes, and we would sing, and we learned a particular style of prayer through singing, and in between songs we would say sorry, thank you, I love you, all those kind of good values that I learned through that. But still, at the same time, we would still go to church So it was mixed. So I never really knew if it was Catholicism or Christianity, but Catholicism, Christianity. Um, and then I started getting really torn up by the the contrasting behaviors between what people were doing and saying versus what what was trying to be taught, the
Like
messages, at
tough.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from a young age I knew that, really, the things that I'm learning from religion, they're there to help me be a good, helpful person on this earth. I knew that and not by words but by instinct. And when people would discriminate about other people for their choices in life, and that would tout themselves as a very religious or very Christian person, um, I felt really disgusted with it, and I actually tried to just throw the whole name away, but still, because they're my friends, that love me, I would still go to church. I would still participate in stuff like that. So I struggled with that for a long time, and eventually I just settled that I was atheist. But then something in me knew that, that there's something, this mysterious force that, that gives life to everything.
Mhm.
And so and then I just followed that instinct to, um, just getting to know myself and getting to know about my life, and which led to meeting good friends like Monica and them, and then I found meditation, and then I still pray before I'll still say, sign of the cross and pray, be thankful for my food. Before I would really shy away from it, or I would, if I did it with friends or family, I would just, in my back of my head, be like, I don't know, I'm just doing this for them. But now I really mean it when I do it. I've found that, uh, even though I don't really take a stance on what I am religious wise, but I see the teachings of Jesus. I see it from a standpoint that the story of Jesus, the way he lived his life and how it unfolded, is a great teaching of, how a human man or woman, can find themselves even in the crazy world.
Right.
And Jesus did it fearlessly. He did it boldly. He did it till his last dying breath of just, you know being the great man he was. So yeah, I don't like it. It's weird for me to say that out loud, because yeah, it's a totally different person than I was. uh but but it was very tiring, because I was like really, at, in the beginning, I was filled with a lot of hatred towards the hypocrisy I saw. But
Mhm.
I understand now, if you try to find the source of everyone's behavior, you're going to go back to the very beginning of time. So, and now I stopped trying to define that now, and now I'm just making the best steps, while being as helpful as I can.
Yeah. Well, I'll
Mm.
say, like, even to relate that back to the definitions too, it does seem like with the definition of religion is much more of an overarching structure. Like it's something
Mm.
that's more of a overall community kind of base versus the definition for spirituality. It does seem more like individualistic, where it's all about like personal growth, personal journeys, and it seems like that's what you kind of went through as well. And I'll say that's why I kind of stepped away from religion more too, was kind of the hypocrisy that I was seeing too from teachings versus implementation. And I know that varies on a person to person basis, but it's like how often do you see it until you're officially like turned off to it, you know? So because it does sound like even though now you consider yourself more spiritual, you still have a foundation rooted in Catholicism and Christianity kind of combined, and that's what kind of like initiated that path. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah,
I also made up
yeah.
that word
It,
interpreting. I'm gonna get a
and
patent.
well, it shaped a big part of my identity, of course. And then, like, I remember, because I would always go with my dad to church, and I remember just like looking at him, and I would pay attention to the way he interacted. Um, and I asked him one day, I was like, "Hey, Dad, are you atheist? And he was like, why are you asking me that? And he's like, honestly, like, I enjoy going to church, and I love, you know, having you there to be surrounded by community, and I go there for that for you, but personally I don't. And then that's like, that added to the confusion, but also a lot of clarity of at least, I felt bad for the way I felt, so I at least felt, I wasn't alone in the feelings that I was going through at the time. So yeah, yeah. Christianity and Catholicism, I'd agree that it shaped a lot of my views initially, which led to
to the current path.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Sure.
So in terms of like your moral code, what like in terms of right and wrong, how do you come to what you feel is right and wrong, or what you know is right and wrong? Like, where does that base stem from, if that makes sense?
I hear you.
Yeah.
So it comes first off from the people in my life, the people who didn't live the best life, learning, knowing to avoid what they did, but also the people who have been angels in my life, like my stepfather, who came in and took care of my mom when my parents divorced when I was little, and he's been the light of my mom's life, and he cooks for her, he serves her endlessly. He may get grumpy and complain sometimes, but like he's built her gardens. He's the man I want to walk as. And if I would say Jesus is embodying someone in today's life, it would be my stepfather. And then of course, the story of Jesus too. And it's crazy because like I just finished reading a book called Resurrecting Jesus, and it's from a Buddhist monk's well, he's not Buddhist anymore, but he's a meditator, and he I guess tells the story of Jesus through the eyes of someone who would be defined as a Buddhist, I guess, because of the way they interpret Jesus' story. Like I said earlier, as a story of a man who helped a lot of people by looking into himself and helping other people look into themselves, and know that there's even peace even amongst like that guy named Legion, and where he had like a bunch of, like he said, there's a bunch of demons or a bunch of thoughts that he can't separate from himself, and Jesus helped him find peace within himself within that. And I think that's the dilemma of a lot of almost everyone in today's age. There's so many perspectives we're learning, so many we're exposed to. It's hard to really get a grip on what one would want to define their life to be, and it's hard to decide what kind of life you want to live when there's that, plus the distraction of entertainment and convenience, all of that's really, yeah, man, it's I feel bad for everyone, but it's the world we live in. And even then, though, back then, I'm sure, even though they didn't have technology, I'm sure it was just as fearful to decide to live one's life, because as we have everything, they had barely nothing, right? Like it was all sticks and stones for the most part. So like Jesus was that example of someone who embodied a fully lived life. And if people can emulate that, like not exactly, movement for movement, how he lived his life, but the messages and the enlightenment that you can see in how he found for himself and for others, we can all be that for each other too in community.
Exactly. Like you're saying, that's transferable. Like that doesn't have to be limited to just like religion, but that part is kind of transferable into other aspects.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So David, did that answer the question a little bit? Because I do kind of want to add on that too.
Kind of, sort of. I mean, no, it answered it in terms, like, for me, like, I want to know, like, where someone's ethics come from, which, of course, the people around them are going to be the ethics. But what if you grew up in a, say Mayan culture or somewhere they sacrifice people regularly, or like the ethics are like we're totally different in different cultures. Like, what is your base for like right and wrong, if that makes sense? Because right and wrong can differ from where people grow up in terms of their ethics.
Mm-hmm.
There are people in the world that are, cannibals, and it's okay where they're at. It's people that want to kill people, so they might be spiritual in some ways, but they believe they should be able to do whatever they want to, and their urge just happens to be to kill someone. Who's to say like that's wrong? Like so for me, it's like, is there a box for your ethics, or is it like whatever you choose to like? Like, I don't, that's more like what my question is.
Well, I'll say like, real quick, I want to add on to that too, because I do think some aspects of ethics and morality, they are inherent to just human nature in general, in my opinion. Like during my classes, my engineering classes, we took a engineering ethics class, and like one of the exams that we had to take was to kill a fat man, and it was basically a railroad. What was it? You had two different options for a railroad, but you had to choose one or the other. You're in the train. On the left side, there's one fat man, and that was the way they put it. I don't know why he had to be fat. And then the other one had like 7 or 10 children, if I remember it correctly. This was over a decade ago. So from the ethical standpoint, and this was no prior teachings, this were just students taking a course from all different walks of life. Had to choose to kill the one adult person or to kill several children. And with that, they would have follow-up questions to really guide and help you understand your ethical and moral beliefs. And so for me, I personally chose, because I remember this part, I chose the fat man. And they were just like, why would you choose him over the other ones? Like, there's no right answer. There's no right or wrong answer. But it's more so to help you question your own moral standpoints. And for me, my interpretation was, it's an adult. It's only one adult versus several children who has lived and experienced life for a longer period of time versus several smaller individuals who are, just getting to experience life. I don't remember what the follow-up to that was. Like, it's a whole series of questions. You can find it online if you Google it, to kill a fat man. I might put it in the description for, the viewers to participate in. But I do think there's certain aspects of the human spirit itself that kind of determines what's right and what's wrong, and then what's being introduced to us as we grow that's built upon it. In my interpretation of it. Like, I think there's an aspect of interaction and environment, because there's I forgot the name of the theory for it. It's like nature versus nurture. So things like that, where our day-to-day interactions also shapes our morality, not just what we choose to participate in, but some things that just kind of change on a day-to-day basis,
Well, my question is more like, what if the day-to-day interactions was, like the Spartans, like it was whole Roman societies where their ethics were crazy because they all taught each other like that, and we look back at it now, we'd be like, yeah, that's probably wrong to be like that. But that's us living in this society. So like that's more my question is like, I mean, you answered it, but it's just, for me, it's simple for me because I have a set of rules, etc. But like from the Bible. But for someone else, like I always like wonder, like, are you just like, okay, this feels good, but what if it feels good to someone else? Like, who are we to say no if that's the way you believe? What if for them, I feel like killing someone and that's the only thing that makes me feel sane? Like, what solid ground do you stand on to say, well, that's not good? Because to them, hurting people makes them feel good. So for me, like I struggle with that line of thinking, the authority to tell someone not to do whatever they want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, Phil, did you want to chime in on that one too?
Yeah. Dude, those are all valid questions, man. And that's, I feel, is the dilemma of every human, but unlike, whatchamacallit, hold on, let me regather my thoughts, because a lot of great things were just said. You too, Darius. Um,
I have my moments. Thank you.
you know, like definitely, if I had been born with the Mayans during that time, and I grew up with that, I 100%, I would be a part of them. I would do the same horrible shit that they did. Thank God. Thank you. I was not born then. I was born here, and for I'll tell you what, I went through a lot of searching for that answer for myself, bro. And in the end, but besides, looking through uh whatever resources I could find through other people's my opinions or books or other resources, the number one thing that I could refer to was my entire life I've lived so far, and being real with what I've been through, what I've done, what I've learned, what I didn't learn, um, and and then of course, like determining what actions in the past were right or wrong. Uh, I guess for me, I can't explain it, man, because I feel like it all just came to me from the right things in life. Like life brought me those answers. And thankfully it's in a way that serves humanity in my world, at least. Um, and man, I feel it. I feel that the want for that answer. And that's the best I can give, I guess.
No, I feel you. It's a hard question, bro.
But I'm doing the best I can. I don't want to kill anybody. I swear to God. Don't want to kill nobody.
Well, so I want to pivot to Nasia real quick too, because I think she would actually be able to chime in on this well. Because so Nasia, since you did say that you're recently really, devoting yourself to Christianity and really expanding your knowledge, the practices, and really going forth with your discovery of Christianity, what was your moral grounding prior? Like when you said that, you thought you were Christian, by your words, you were saying, and then now you consider yourself like a true Christian. Because kind of tying it back to David's question too, there had to be some sort of understanding, even though you weren't doing the full implementation and practices of Christianity, that still guided you to be the person you are with your own moral and ethics.
Yes. So I would say before I just tried to be a good person, the so-called good person, like be nice to people, say the right things, don't hurt anybody, don't trip anyone, be just as nice as you can possibly be. And that's the way I tried to live. I tried to live in that life. Just like, obviously, don't kill people, don't steal things, don't touch things that aren't yours. Try not to get angry, don't be upset, and all this other things that most people try to live by on a regular basis. I feel like most people have that baseline: don't kill, don't steal, don't destroy, don't lie, all that stuff kind of just embedded in their hearts. And that's where I was before. But I feel like moving forward and actually growing in Christianity, actually growing and knowing Jesus and having a relationship with Jesus, it's more of actually gaining that perspective of I live as I am directed by the Holy Spirit. I am lived as I am directed by the Bible. The Bible says to do certain things, and the Spirit within me is kind of led to go in that direction. It's not so much of a decision. It's not something I try to do. It's something I'm more pulled towards. As God leads me, as Jesus leads me, that's where I go. So it's less of me making the choice and more of God saying, do this, do this, do this.
Okay, I like that. So, because overall, would you say there's more of a connection with the Spirit itself that is now kind of leading that way for guidance? So it's more so of how can I call that? So it's more so of an intuition that's being sent to you from God, from Jesus, that's allowing you kind of. In
a way you can say that, yes. It's more of an indwelling. It's like God's Spirit is indwelling inside of me. So I am being led by that Spirit. And the more I'm led by that, the more power that He has in me to then lead me. So it's just like it inches and grows and grows and grows in that perspective.
Okay, that makes sense then too. So, because like, so to throw in my little aspect of it too, to chime in on that question, because David, I know, back when I was still active within our church, like, we used to go to children's church all the time, and I believe I stopped going it around like a teenager, like late teenager, no, it might be early teenager, somewhere around that time. But like, even practices within religion that still shape me are Ten Commandments, seven deadly sins, and I think those are primarily like the foundation of like what I took away from it. But there was some sort of understanding that shaped my moral and ethics. And so my question, for you directly would be, even though I stepped away from the church, relative to you still being involved with the church, I still feel like we still have like the same kind of moral foundations, right? Like, we know certain rights and wrongs. We do differ on some things, of course, but it's like, what would you say that moral background kind of, comes from for me? Because even though we have that same uprooting, there was that initial departure, and so now we're on still two different paths, yet we still have similar foundations. Because I would say that's inherent to my experiences and my beliefs, but where would you say that kind of comes from?
I would say your core of beliefs, in terms of your ethics, are Christian. At least the same values as Christian, but at the same time, I would say most of societies is, even if they don't admit it, So, like because Christianity has like stated so much of what our values are, people are believing it even if they don't want to. So, our core of what's right and wrong, for the most part, in my opinion, Christian. You got some different things that you believe in. For me, we always chop it up about it.
Oh, always.
Number one thing, like the number one defining factor in the Bible is like free will. You can't force nobody to be Christian. He wants you to willingly choose. So if you're being forced, somebody's already out of pocket in some fashion, no matter what. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's my thing is, how can I be Christian and not respect the fact that you choose what you want to believe? That makes zero sense. I don't have to like it, but I respect it 100%, and it don't change our relationship at all.
Not at all. Yeah, because we both even talked about too. Is like it's kind of cool when we do have those differing views too. Because at the end of the day, it's like we've known each other since we were like, yay, hi. You were like a little bit taller, but But it's like to still see us as adults having still core foundations and then still being able to, discuss things that we disagree on. I think that's where, the human nature side of things kind of come into play. Because as you mentioned, like with free will as well, I think it's kind of like a paradox within religion. Because if you have a text that is guiding you, is that truly free will? Because wouldn't free will be more of a experiential kind of, here's what I experienced, this is what I've taken away from those kind of events in terms of how it shapes someone or builds that foundation. So I kind of feel like that's a little bit of a paradox because you still have the guidelines to kind of conform to and act within, but then on the other side, it's saying to act freely.
Well, I would say my opinion is the Bible says what you should do. It doesn't say, it tells you what you should do. It doesn't say you have to do anything.
Yeah.
It's telling it's
like a may versus a must kind of thing.
Right. Now, and the premise on the Bible is more to get into heaven, right? Like it's telling you how to get to heaven for the most part, a roadmap to how to get to heaven. Mm-hmm. And on the way to heaven, you're becoming a better person and becoming more like Jesus. That's more of the premise of the Bible. Not you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this just to be on earth. You got free will. And the Bible clearly states you got free will. It's just telling you what you should do. And it does tell you what you have to do to get to heaven, but not necessarily just to be a good person.
Okay. So I want to pivot that over to Phil as well, because though you do lean more towards like the spiritual side of things, more towards like finding your own guidance and path. Like, if, because I'm not sure what your thoughts are on the afterlife. If you want, you can like chime in on that as well. But like, what kind of motivates you to continue down the path that you have? Because like for Christianity, for various religions, there is that aspect of the afterlife, the internal afterlife, the reckoning of what comes next after we pass away. But for those who are more spiritual, more atheists, sometimes even agnostic, there's not a guarantee of what comes next, or if there is an afterlife at all. So what kind of continues to guide you down the path that you have followed down?
Because I'm still always a human, that I am always at a doorstep of, falling into actions that don't serve myself or the people that I love around me and humanity. So I always, I want to learn. It keeps me curious. And as for afterlife, I mean, that's been one of the things I've ceased searching for, because I used to try to define it, because I was so at odds ends with the action, with my identity with religion when I was younger. But now it's funny now to me, because you know I think heaven can be lived here on earth while we are alive, and that's how, and the way I can interpret it, either the story from Jesus or a lot of other perceptions that don't fall into malicious practices. But I see it as a step of instructions, to live in harmony on earth, at peace on earth with love. And so as for what happens after, I don't know. In my heart of hearts, for me to try to define it, to use a word to describe what it would be like to pass on, I think is all coming from a human place still. But what's important is that the way we live our life, and even if it's to find a life in heaven after we die, then that's fine. If the result is we be good to each other and live wholesomely, then I'm all for it. So I mean, I would I would love to find that dimension or place after I die, but I could never make a stance on what happens.
Okay, so for you, it's more so of what actions you take, like while we're still living, like while still on Earth, kind of thing. That's what your primary focus and motivation is.
Journey before destination, and of course,
I like that.
Even though I want, so the way I can kind of I as a visual is that the life and the man I want to be, who can provide, protect, for whoever is in my life in that time. In order to get to that location and time and place and mentality and spirit, I have to have done every single step of work, even the failures, even and all that, in order to reach that place, right? But so every step. So as long as I'm taking and taking every step and letting my life unfold and doing the actions that I know I must do, I'm embodying that life already. So for me right now, life isn't perfect, but I feel like heaven is on earth for me right now. If that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. Like, Nasia, David, did either one of you chime in on that as well? It makes sense to me what Phil's saying.
I'm like confused a little bit. I was gonna ask like more concise, because like I got confused while you were talking. You're saying more the way you live your life is heaven, for the most part, but you don't know about if you're going anywhere after here, or like I got like super confused if
Yeah,
it
so
was a destination or not.
I guess to be more clear, then I feel like heaven is a state of being. And it's not to mean like, oh, it's a blissful, like I have, I go through things too, but I have faith that I'm doing my very best to making the most out of what I got, that life has given me, God has given me, and to me to me that is the greatest thing to follow. And when I don't follow those things, I feel like I'm in hell, like straight up. And so I don't know if there's something after I die. To me, that doesn't matter. To me, is that I'm serving life right now, and that still doesn't, like, even with that perspective, it doesn't really make a stance on afterlife or not. It's just I'm not seeking to define that. So
Okay.
So that makes sense to me too. So it's overall the experience itself, the day to day that's kind of where you're kind of coinciding with the heaven or hell kind of approach, and that's kind of what's allowing you to kind of guide your actions and how you become the person that you are today and how you've grown from the person that you were yesterday. That's my interpretation of it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Phil?
Yeah.
Okay. Because even with me being agnostic, I still don't know what happens next too. I'm kind of open to all theoretical outcomes. Like there could be heaven or hell, there can be reincarnation, there can be ghosts. We can just be sitting in the ground chilling. It's like I'm open to all of those because, and I guess this kind of goes more into like why like I'm more spiritual than religious too, is because we don't know for sure until it's over. It's till our time is done, and then even at that point, how can we relay that information to the living? Historically, there has been individuals who claim to have like near-death experiences. They would witness angels, they would experience heaven or hell for a little bit, come back and speak upon it, but we would only have to go with their word at that point. So, and there's nothing wrong with having some sort of predestination after we pass, but I'm just saying from my perspective that if I can't speak on it conclusively, then I can't give 100% of my support to it.
My thing is, I think even science would say the soul is forever. So we're only in our bodies for a limited amount of time. And say heaven is say a club, right? Just like say it's a club, right?
Yeah.
So
it's ironic you don't like going to the clubs though.
Yeah, and say you're born on your destination to this club, your journey.
Right.
And you got your whole life to choose what outfit you're gonna put on for the club when you get to the door. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you're gonna be in the club forever once you get in the club. I don't want to live this life and put on flip-flops and then come to the club and they're like, yeah, player, them flip-flops, we're not letting you in with them flip-flops. So
this is a good analogy. I'll give you that.
So it's like a big decision that your whole life is leading to. I don't want my life to not get me in the club when I had the knowledge to get myself into the club forever. So I'm forever on the street. Yeah, I mean, I want to be forever in the club. So for me, that's a question that weighs heavy on my mind. Do I want to just have fun and ignore what can get me into the club? You know what I mean? Or do I want to, live my life? Because as a Christian, my purpose is to get into heaven and my purpose is to help others get into heaven. That's more where my purpose is. It's not necessarily for this life, for having fun, for enjoyment all the time. So, that's like more where my mind goes when I think about it. I don't want to be in the flip flops. I don't want to have the wrong hat on. I don't want to be out there. I don't know, suit and tie, no tie, and like, hey, player, yeah, you get to go take that other road. I'm good. I'm cool on that one.
I like that analogy. I kind of came up with
actually.
a similar one. If I can piggyback off of that.
Yeah.
Like, I came up with I'm not sure if I came up with it, but it's like the analogy of heaven. It's like many people tried to work themselves to get into heaven, when in reality, there's like, look at it as a nightclub, and it's like a VIP club, and there's only one name on the list, and that name is Jesus Christ. Jesus is the only person who actually earned their way into heaven. So he's the only name on the list. You go up to the door, you try to get in without Jesus. It's like, you're not getting in. You're not on the list. So in order to get into heaven, you have to be with Jesus. It says in the Bible to put on the Lord Jesus Christ. Kind of like as David was saying, you got to have the right clothes on. The right clothes in Christianity would be wearing Jesus. Wear Jesus. Be embodied by Jesus. Be indwelled with Jesus. So once you get to the door, it's like Jesus is there. He's like, oh, it's like when you're on the list, it's like you can bring your friends in with you, kind of a thing. So it's like, oh, they're with me. So Jesus will show up next to you, just like, oh, he's with me. She's with me. He can come in. He's the only name on the list. But if you're with him, you can get in. Everybody else, anybody who tries to do it by themselves, they won't be able to get into the door because he's the only name on the list to get in.
Okay. So, okay, I'll ask, so this will be a little harder question for both you too, based on my experience too, because so as I'm agnostic now, I was never baptized. Like, I still go to church. I have family that are Baptist, Christians, so on and so forth. Do you think that without meeting all the requirements or the checklist to get into the club, to get into the VIP, it's like, do you feel that those individuals, if they truly act within the moral and ethical guidelines that we said, are in line with Christian values, would they still be accessible to the club, i.e. heaven, or would they be forced on the street without? And if they are not allowed in the club, why should that be the case? If they genuinely have actions and hearts in the right direction.
So what you're saying is more like in line with kind of like what the Egyptians believe, where like your good had to outweigh the evil. It ain't no good had to outweigh the evil.
That's a Anubis having a heart as light as feather. Yeah,
right. With God, Jesus gets you in the club. I'm not God. I can't tell you why he made it that way, but through his design, Jesus is the way into the club. It's not if you did more good or bad in your life, it's just not the way it is. I can't explain why God made the choices he is. He's God, is not me. I can't. I would be out of pocket trying to say why he did what he did. Mm-hmm. But if it's not through Jesus, not getting in. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
Well, I feel like many people forget that God, which comes from the term Elohim in Hebrew, which means judge, God is a judge. So he's going to judge your entire life, good, bad, and everything else in between. And just like a regular judge, if you kill someone, but if you go up to the judge and says, but I donated to charity and I took care of children and babies and I went out on the street and fed homeless people, he's not going to give you a handout and say, all right, you don't have to go to prison for killing this person because you're a good person all the other days of the year. It's like, no, you're going to have to get punished for what you did. And that's the same way that God is. God is a perfect judge. So of course, you may have done a million good things, but you're still going to have to be punished for the bad things that you did. There has to be a retribution. There has to be a punishment. And that's where Jesus comes in. Jesus lived the perfect life. He didn't do any sin. He was honorable. He was respectful. He cared for people. There was no sin in him whatsoever. He lived the righteous life, but he gave himself as the perfect sacrifice. So because he laid his life down, anybody who believes in him and looks to him as being that retribution, as being the punishment for their sin, every sin that they commit in their life, they look to Jesus and say, Jesus took that sin off of me. You don't have to take that punishment. So you're able to go and face God at the end of your life and say, I know I did a lot of wrong, but I put my trust in Jesus, who did all the right things. He took my penalty for me. So because he took the penalty, you don't have to go to jail. You don't have to go to hell and for the rest of your life, for rest forever. You don't have to pay that punishment. And you get to go in based off of what Jesus did, not based off of what you did.
Okay, but you can only obtain that once you're obtaining and accepting Jesus in your life. So, i.e., baptism, so on and so forth. Is that correct?
Well, yes, in a way, yes. I feel like baptism, I feel like somebody explained it to me kind of like being married. When you're in a relationship, you get engaged, you're kind of like, once it's like going up to signing the paper, that doesn't make you married in your heart. It's like, that's just a formality. That's just showing the world that you're married. So the same thing with baptism is kind of just a declaration of saying, I am a Christian. I do have this faith. I believe under extreme circumstances, like somebody was actually incapable of getting baptized, God's not going to say, oh, you didn't get baptized because you were locked in a prison or something, so you couldn't do it. He's like, oh, you can't come in because you didn't do this formality. But it's more of a, if you can do it, you should do it. It's a declaration of faith. Just like when you get married, you have a ceremony. It's a declaration of getting married.
Okay. So would you say, so, oh yeah, go ahead, do it.
No, I agree with that. That's all I was saying.
Okay. Because like, so overall, so it's kind of just to clarify too. So the declaration itself, that's what you use analogously to the formalities of marriage. That's what I was understanding, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So from that interpretation, for the individuals that, I guess if they're able to get baptized, but they choose not to, but still act righteously, would they still be frowned upon as well? Or like, where would that, put them?
What do you mean
by?
What was that?
I think.
What do you mean by frowned upon?
Well, in terms of like getting into the club, as we're using that analogy. So like, would the individuals who do live righteous lifestyles, but choose not to be baptized or anything like that nature, are they automatically damned to hell? Like, it just seems a little unfair in that way.
I mean, if you don't choose Jesus, you're going to hell. I mean, Romans 10:9 and 10. Can't remember exactly the wording right now, but it says,
if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you get saved. It's not how you act. It's not if you're doing good things as a person, if that makes sense. It's by the grace of God that you're saved.
Okay. And Phil, you're about to chime in as well. Sorry about that.
I was going to try to clarify what I thought you were trying to ask, pretty much like if someone was born away from any knowledge of the teachings of Jesus, like specifically, but they still, lived a life that, if one were to look from the outside looking in, could say this is a life that Jesus would have lived, but they didn't know Jesus, so they never proclaimed Jesus, and they never worshipped him and admired him, in that way. But, that's what I was just trying to say, and to maybe clarify your question about that.
Yeah, and I know that's exactly what I was trying to get at too. So yeah, thank you for that as well.
So I mean, is getting into heaven dependent on where you're born then?
I will say I'm not God and I can't judge him, so I don't know. But
I hear you.
I'm cool with defaulting to certain things that I just don't have the knowledge of. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I feel that.
It does say in the Bible that for those who don't know and they do wrong, God's going to have a lesser punishment for them because they didn't know what they were doing, versus somebody who does know and they still do wrong. There's going to be a great punishment for them. So it kind of goes along those lines, as you were saying. God's merciful. He's gracious. He knows you didn't know. So there's going to be some cushioning for that. But for people who have the knowledge but still don't fall in line, there's going to be a greater punishment for them because clearly they knew.
Right. See, but you say it would be a lighter punishment, but why would someone be punished for, their not ignorance, I don't want to use that term, but like being uneducated or uninformed of something? Why should there still be a punishment. You know, like if I was running to a class, but I didn't know that I had class that evening, why would there be that significant punishment? You know, even though it's lesser, it's like, why should there be a punishment for those who are uninformed or not even aware of the, you know, the existence of such teachings?
Because it's still justice. Like if I didn't know that stores, you had to buy things at the store, I just walked in and took it because I didn't know you were supposed to buy it. I thought this stuff was free. I just walked in and took stuff. Like I'd still be punished for that. It's like, oh, you stole it. Like, I'm not sure if there should be a different rule for me so much. It's just like, maybe there might be a lighter punishment because I was stupid and I didn't know. But at the same time, it's still justice because you went in and stole it. Or if you go to an extremer sense and say, oh, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to kill people, but you still killed someone, then you still get punished for that, even though you didn't know you weren't supposed to do it. So sometimes it's like, you can't, there still has to be justice, even though there's ignorance. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, honestly, that was a good analogy because I can agree with that. I see what you mean now. Okay. So one question I did want to ask too. Is everyone still good on time too? I think we'll probably have like another 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Phil, Nasia, you good too?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So one question I wanted to ask you all too. So like, were there any like practices or beliefs from the other aspect? If you do look at spirituality and religion as separate, because I know some of you identify that they're more entwined, were there any practices that stood out to, you know, why you identify as such but not the other? Like why you identify as religious instead of spirituality or spiritual versus religious?
Mm.
Oh, no.
I don't know, bro. I grew up with like, I already had my base growing up, you know, and life has proved to me that my base was correct. So I have no idea how to answer that question for me.
Okay. Well, Nasia, Phil, what about either of you? Like, is there like any particular beliefs, practices, or any reason why you would choose, you know, one word over the other as an identifier to say I am a religious person, not a spiritual person, or I am a spiritual person, not a religious person?
I hope nobody tries to define me that way. And to be honest, that's what I've been trying to get away from is words or use of words.
Like to remove like the binary. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and just in terms of, you know, to separate myself from the other people's opinions, so that way I can continue living what my life. And so, with that being said, yeah, I hope whatever word someone comes up to me has for me is, you know, shoot, kind at least, at the very least.
Okay. Nasia, what about you?
I think from a similar perspective, I don't really like either label. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go more spiritual route versus religion, only because religion has transformed into something that's very structured, that's very like man-centered, that's a lot of rules and regulations versus being about God and what God wants and having a relationship with God versus having these set of rules that dictate your reality. So it's more for me actually growing in a relationship with God, growing a relationship with Jesus, and not having this like box that you're putting yourself into. And that's kind of what religion is. You're kind of almost forcing yourself to be a good person based off of these standards versus allowing the Spirit of God to come into you and dwell you and lead you to being that person, transforming you into that person versus forcing yourself to be that way through religion.
Okay. I really like that too. Like the way you explained it, like the way you express yourself, because it's like, it does paint that picture that says like the rules don't necessarily have to be hard set. Like there are some rules that are clearly defined, but there is still flexibility within it. That's my interpretation of it.
I wouldn't say no so much as flexibility. It's more of you know you're not supposed to do it, but a lot of the times we have messed up nature inside of us that even though we want to do the right thing, we sometimes mess up and don't do that the way we're supposed to. Like, we don't want to lie, but somehow we end up lying. We don't want to steal, but sometimes we steal. We don't want to cheat, but sometimes we cheat. That's just our nature at times. But it's like allowing God to come into you and literally change your nature so that you don't do those things anymore.
Okay.
So that you're more inclined to do the right thing versus forcing yourself to do it against your own nature.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And David, you agree with that as well, as also like a Christian?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm trying to think, because I forgot to write down a closing question for y'all, so I'm going to try to think of one on the fly. So I guess one thing I want to say is, so I guess I could touch on like prayer versus meditation, right? Because I know meditation is like big within the spiritual community. I know prayer is really big like within the Christian and religious community. So would you say, see, this is hard for me to come up on the fly, so I'm trying my best. So like the aspects of prayer and meditation, do you feel that they have similar beliefs with bringing you closer to the spiritual world and the spirit itself? Or do you feel like they're completely different things?
I think they're completely different things. Just because you're not outwardly doing nothing doesn't mean like you're doing the same thing. Prayer is about, asking for guidance from God, whereas when you're meditating, you're more focused on yourself. So, from what I've learned, at least, that was my interpretation.
Okay. So you would say only prayer would be the one that would bring you closer to that aspect of being closer to the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, God, so on and so forth.
I mean, when you pray, you're having your conversations with God. That's like simply what it is. When you meditate, are you just having conversations with yourself? Like, more of the people that I've talked to that meditate, they're like looking for like a inner like peace, or like to calm things through themselves. Whereas when I pray, I'm looking for to ask God to help me with my issues, if that makes a difference.
Okay.
That's the best I could do to explain it.
Well done.
Nasia, Phil? Or Phil, you're about to say something?
I mean, I can see why it could be so separated or put together. But I agree with you. I agree a lot of meditation in media, mainstream, and that's why I don't ever like labeling myself as a spiritual person. It's what others perceive of me. But shit, I lost my train of thought. But when it comes to meditation, I don't believe if you're meditating on yourself or you're trying to seek something, I honestly think that's missing the mark of meditation. It's actually to learn how to not succumb to the self, and it's not trying to label or trying to find anything or anyone. Except, for me at least, whenever I practice, it's just to remind myself of the peace and love that's coming through life through me. Just like anyone Christian would say, God is living through them, and that's what they need to be reminded of in order to enact certain things. I just use, in order to describe my experience to you, I have to use this language, which is the conundrum of words, but yeah. So it I guess, because I think even between two people praying can be different, even if maybe they're praying in the right direction, if that makes sense too. but it can also be separate. It could also be one is maybe not praying for guidance to see how life and God will provide for them. But maybe they're just, doing oh, please, I pray for more money. You know what I mean? People can do that with meditation too. And,
okay. So in your interpretation, they'll be more similar than different.
I prefer to see that, because I think the more we keep dividing, of course there is always life's judgment, and that judgment appears as soon as the action happens, at least outside of a lot of human structures, because the court system takes too damn long. But but yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. And Nasia, what about you?
I see them as being different, meditation versus prayer, where meditation, I don't know very much about it personally. I just know some things that I've looked into or researched, and it's like you do connect spiritually. You are connecting to some higher power, some spiritual power. The thing is, there's a lot of spirits, and there's a lot of spirits that you can meditate to, or you can just open yourself up to whatever spirit is in the place. Whereas a lot of the time, most people are kind of focused on the highest power, which is God, the created universe. But sometimes you might be opening yourself up to a different spirit. Whereas God, at least from what I know, is that God made a way to get to him, and that's through praying, which is, you could say it's like a similar instance kind of thing. Like you're speaking, you're opening yourself up to a spirit, you're opening yourself up to this power, but it's more directed. You're directing it in the way that you want it to be directed. So it's like God made it so we go to him through Jesus. For a Christian, we go to him through Jesus. Whereas in meditation, you're kind of going into yourself and you're finding or searching out what it is, or kind of emptying yourself or whatever it may be, and letting that kind of just take you somewhere, versus kind of having more of a directed path to wherever you're going. Again, I don't know much about meditation, so I can't really speak so much on that, but I do see them as being very different.
Okay. Even though they do channel spiritual aspects, but I see what you mean. One's more direct versus one being more. Okay, understood then. So I would say I practice both. I pray every now and then. I've been trying to get better at meditation, and just trying to figure out things as I go. Like I think me being more agnostic, more spiritual leaning out of the two, I would say that allows me to have that additional flexibility to kind of try to understand both a little bit. So, but I like how all of you chimed in on it. Yeah. So I think, were there any other like questions or topics that y'all wanted to come up with too before we go?
I do want to say one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of want to address Christians. And Phil, I used to be that guy that you probably didn't like. That was the guy that I was when I was young. Because I was more. Because, I grew up Christian, and I was more worried about following rules than loving people. But if you read the Bible, like other than free will, like agape love is, which is loving your neighbor as you love yourself. That's the type of love that he wants us all to exemplify. And I used to kind of, it was difficult. It was easy to say I love people, but it was difficult to actually act in that way because I was so worried about following rules and others following rules, if that makes sense. So I want to tell people, don't get so caught up in making other people follow your rules and what you want. Be more worried about loving other people, and it'll help them in their journey more. It was some things that I did when I was young that probably scarred people for life, simply because they felt so judged or felt so discriminated against, which when I look back, I'm like, yeah, if I saw that person, I would apologize for it. And in my mind at that moment, I was trying to do what was right, but that was superseding me loving that person. And And that probably turned away those people from Christianity back in the day. So I would just, kind of have people tap into the Bible and really read how you should treat other people.
No, I like that. That's like actually a very good representation of like growth and stuff too. Because overall, it's like as human beings, the ongoing journey is always about growth, understanding, and evolving from day to day. So I respect that. Thank you for that, David.
No problem.
Okay, Phil and Nasia, any closing statements from either of you? Then I'll go ahead and do my outro. Nope. Okay.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate everyone's perspectives, and I really love that you both exist and are living the life you live and doing the work you do. I can tell you all are helping the people and loved ones around you. That means a lot to me, and especially Darius for allowing us to share space with each other today. So I really enjoyed it.
No, absolutely. I'm glad to hear that, Phil. Like honestly, that's what I always love most about these conversations too. It's like we really get a chance to know each other more, and that's something that becomes harder and harder in like the public space with, how polarized everything is, especially in the States. So having little moments like this, like little pockets of time allocated to really get to know one another, I truly love these, and that's why I always enjoy doing them. So thank you for that, Phil. And I'm gonna keep trying to bring more of these, more of these topics to the table too. To our viewers and to our listeners, so what are your thoughts on theology, spirituality versus religion? Make sure you leave your comments below, subscribe to our channel for more content, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, much love and peace.
Just got off the clock, just got on my chill. Called up my homie Brent to see what be the deal. What you trying to do? I'm just trying to heal. Hella floated, never bloated's what I'm trying to feel. Hop in the whip and